Alright, let's talk about it. Nintendo fans will never stand on business. I say Nintendo, but really Nintendo's just a symptom of a bigger issue that affects all of gaming and really may even have some implications outside of the world of gaming. I'm convinced Nintendo fans are in a toxic relationship with Nintendo. Let's walk back to the Switch 2 unveil that Nintendo did back at the beginning of the year when that console got announced. It came out as $499 or whatever the price was at the time. And obviously this price kind of upset us. This console coming out $499, $500, not that much far behind the competition, but also is not as powerful as the competition. And of course, at that time, the consumers were rightfully upset with Nintendo. The streams of their Treehouse Lives and their directs were filled with drop the price, drop the price, drop the price. And to put further icing on the cake, when they finally revealed the price of their flagship title for the console, their only launch title for the system, I will emphasize the only launch title, Mario Kart World. $80 for that game, $90 for physical in certain regions. Obviously, everyone was pissed off. Obviously, right? And of course, on social media, you have a lot of people moral grandstanding, preaching on their soapbox. Don't buy the console. Drop the price. We have to speak with our wallets. Vote with our wallets. The same things we always say every time corporate greed is involved, every time a company is participating in anti-consumer practices. It's the same song and dance every time around. So to me, it was no surprise when the day that the console came out, you had every streamer and influencer, every content creator who was shouting this drop the price, don't buy, vote with your wallet BS. Every single one of them were reviewing the console day one. I swear to God, I could call out some names. Matter of fact, I might just do it. Mug Thief, Some Ordinary Gamers, Beat 'em Ups, Arlo. To be fair, some of these content creators are kind of Nintendo centric, so you can't really take what they say at face value. Nintendo is their niche, right? But the thing is, if you're so against the pricing, they're kind of like, it's not ideal, but we're gonna get it anyway, which in my opinion is just as bad. And the reason this is such a problem is that a lot of people, not to sound pretentious or holier than thou or to sound critical or anything, a lot of people, especially now, have trouble thinking for themselves. And it's not a specific group. It's not a jab aimed at a specific group. It's just the reality of the world we live in. So it leads to a lot of people taking a lot of these guys' words and actions very seriously. And so when you have influencers, especially influencers who consistently talk about anti-consumer practices like Mug Thief. I'm not trying to start beef with anybody. I don't even know if he's gonna see this, but whatever. A content creator like that who's constantly talking about anti-consumerism, the quality of the products we're getting from these big developers, publishers, corporations, lessening, all for the sake of increasing shareholder value, to then go out of their way to support said company taking advantage blatantly of consumers for the sake of shareholder value increases is just straight up hypocritical. You can't really take someone like that seriously. Mutahar as well. Those are kind of the main two guys who were the culprits, at least from what I saw. And I can't really be mad at a creator who didn't comment on the prices in such a heavily grandstanding way if they go out and buy the Switch. Like for instance, as far as I know, Scott the Woz doesn't really comment on stuff like that. Obviously, Scott is a Nintendo-centric channel. He does cover other things, but Nintendo's like his main thing. He got the Switch, and I kind of expected that from him, right? But he never made a big deal out of voting with your wallet and being anti-corporation, or these corporations being anti-consumer. And these content creators have to set examples for consumers. I feel like the meaning of the word influencer has gotten lost in translation somewhere along the way, where some people don't really understand the gravity of that word and how, especially now, influencer opinion travels a lot. And a lot of the rhetoric you'll hear in these conversations come directly from influencers. Influencers create a lot of the conversation around a lot of topics. Like, for instance, the Among Us craze, where you had influencers who were playing Among Us in like 2020. Among Us, or even similar games to that, such as Lockdown Protocol, or that one Western social deduction game that's kind of like Among Us. I can't remember the name of it right now. Influencers create trends, and out of sheer FOMO, people are going to want to also participate in these trends and in these moments in online culture. I can't blame someone for feeling FOMO, but what I can blame is people's self-control when it comes to FOMO. And listen, I'm not gonna completely blame the content creator either, because at the end of the day, their job is to make money off of content covering games and topics and things like that. I understand, but what you also have to understand is for things to get better, a line has to be drawn. If we don't want these companies to keep taking advantage of us and giving us features that have been available for a decade on other platforms, voice chat, the Switch one did not have voice chat, which is not a problem, right? The Xbox 360 had in-game voice chat in 2006. 2006. It's been 20 years, almost 19 years since the 360 came out. The PlayStation 3 in 2007 had voice chat. It wasn't in-game, but you could talk to your friends on your PlayStation consoles. The Nintendo Switch 2 is charging you to talk to people on your console. They're charging you for Discord, my guys. They're charging for a manual that comes with a game. And to me personally, I think this is the biggest symbol of Nintendo just wanting to milk every cent from the consumer because they know they can. I repeat, they're doing this because they know they can get away with it. If you want to go back to whenever the revolution, the Nintendo Wii was unveiled, go back to that time, I think 2005 or something like that, 2005, 2006. The GameCube was the weakest selling console of that generation. Outside of the Dreamcast, of course, Nintendo had something to prove at that time. And so in order to get people invested into their new Wii economy, they did a lot of plays to cater to consumers who needed to be convinced. One, those GameCube players who invested a lot of time and money into their GameCube libraries could play their GameCube games on that original Wii model. But also, in order to get people invested into the new Wii economy, they included a pack-in game to show you what the Wii was about. And that product obviously was Wii Sports. It was free. The game was free. It came with every Wii, and it's one of the best-selling games of all time. Every Wii owner got the game for free. And guess what happened? The console became one of the best-selling consoles of all time, I think behind the Nintendo DS and the PlayStation 2. And it just goes to show you, when these companies' backs are to the wall, they will have to cater to the consumer. And like really cater, they'll have to bend a knee. That can only happen when Nintendo fans stand on business. I think it's just a nice show of goodwill to give your consumers something to play on a console that they just bought, especially if you're going to spend upwards $500. The Wii was however much it was at launch, not $500 though, right? And even on that console, they could still spare that production to pack in a game for free. And I think the real change would be the management at Nintendo. The management at the time, Reggie Fils-Aimé, Nintendo America president, was the one who pushed for that free pack-in game. If I recall, the Japanese suits didn't want that at all, but Reggie really pushed for that free pack-in game, and that's a decision that played out for the better. The Nintendo DS had a bunch of freeware that came installed on the device. The 3DS had freeware that came installed on the device. Something to get your feet wet with the console that you're buying. And that's something that's been missing more and more with passing console generations. Now, the PlayStation 4 had something weird with the PlayStation camera, and Astro had like a little Astro minigame with the PlayStation camera. That was like the only pack-in thing I can remember. But the PS5 gave you an entire 3D platformer, which could literally be a whole game in its own right. And the new Xboxes have Game Pass, of course, which I think has inherent value to people who don't have a lot of money to spend on games. You know, about like 10 bucks to play a really diverse library of games. which is cool. Game Pass has its own problems, but that's a separate topic. But Game Pass is good value for a consumer who doesn't have a lot to spend, especially if you're spending, I repeat, $500 on a console. Let's go back to the Switch 2, a console which is not really a marked improvement over its predecessor. It is more powerful, yes, but if we still compare it to the consoles that came out a couple of years ago, we are still not able to adequately compete in terms of performance against these consoles. If I'm not mistaken, like Elden Ring's having a lot of trouble running on the Switch 2, right? That's what people have been saying who've been playing it. I'm sure Duskbloods will be a lot better, but Elden Ring is a PS4 game. It's a PS4 game. It shouldn't be having trouble on a console that's supposed to be on par, if not below, a bit below, like a PS5. If I remember correctly, people were saying that the Switch 2 is supposed to be on par with a PS4 Pro. It can't run Elden Ring. You paid $500 for this product. It's barely different than the first product. Not to mention, you're having to pay extra money for games that you already played like 8 years ago. That's crazy to me. Breath of the Wild has a Switch 2 release for $70 for a frame rate increase. Brother, are you serious? And this is what I'm saying, like these red boxed Switch 1 games are scams, genuinely. This is something that could have been a free update, like The Witcher 3's PS5 upgrade was free. A lot of the I could get into next gen upgrades in a whole other topic, but I heavily disagree with this rhetoric that a next gen upgrade deserves to be any more than the regular price of the game, or the fact that you even need to pay for most of these upgrades. I get it, they're going back into an older game and doing extra work, and the extra work needs to be compensated in some way. $70 for Breath of the Wild is not it, and I'm pretty sure that's not including the DLC. I could be wrong, but they may not be including the DLC. And Tears of the Kingdom as well. I mean, they did the exact same thing. I just think it would have been a good, gracious move for the consumer to include those upgrades for free for inserting a Switch 1 disc or a Switch 1 cartridge. But Nintendo doesn't play to the consumer. They play to their own interests. And so many people I see online are just so willing to take this obviously power imbalance relationship between corporation and consumer lying down. The amount of people I've seen saying, I'm going to buy it anyway, calling people broke who don't want to buy the Switch 2. When honestly, even now, the Switch 2 hasn't really proved its value, I don't think. We have two Nintendo games that are coming out, and we have some scheduled coming out later, right? We have Metroid Prime 4, which still isn't out for some reason. Like, it still amazes me that game has been in development for so long. I'm sure the game is going to be okay, but dang, we've been waiting a long time for Metroid Prime 4. And, we just got Donkey Kong, which I hear is a really good game. It's by the Mario Odyssey team. And, I love Mario Odyssey. And just to clarify, I do not have a Switch 2. I think this issue of FOMO and the need for players to be right on top of a game as soon as it releases is what's killing consumer control of the product. This fast-paced environment that we now kind of move in, where people feel like they need to be right on top of a game as soon as it releases. It's a symptom of content creation, but I can't blame it all on content creation. This issue has been exacerbated and amplified because of content creators, playing games as soon as they come out, or what have you. These people who aren't making content also feel like, because, they're seeing, this game all over social media, they also need to play. Or because they're seeing people talk about these things that they also need to play. I saw a take from the Black Okage. I do like his content. I do like his stuff. He had a take where he said, if you aren't a content creator, you don't need to play a game as soon as it comes out. And I'm really conflicted on that take, because I understand why these creators play these products as soon as they come out. But also, it just sets, like in the examples before of these creators talking about boycotting, it sets a horrible precedence, because as creators, you have such a vast influence on the opinion of consumers. If they see you playing something like, I like MGS. a fair bit. I saw these content creators playing Delta. It made me think, ooh, maybe I'll play Delta. But then I had to lock in and realize I don't need to play Delta right now. I can just go back and play and finish MGS3. Actually finish MGS3. I consider myself someone who has a fair amount of restraint. And so when you see these creators playing these games, I even get swayed. So what's a consumer who is trained, and I put emphasis on the word trained, to not have constraint? A consumer who is trained and groomed by these corporations to buy things as soon as they come out. A consumer who is manipulated by corporations, influencers being sponsored by these corporations to cover these products as soon as they come out. What is that consumer who lacks restraint? They're gonna end up buying the product. And it's a different story if it's a product you genuinely support, a product that has good intent behind it. At the end of the day, every game's goal is to make money, obviously, right? But it's the way that they treat you. A lot of these corporations treat the consumer like they're stupid, like they're disposable. And in a lot of cases, we are, because we buy the crap that they put out. One of my biggest examples of this is back to Nintendo, the Pokemon franchise. This franchise for the last 10 years has been on a downwards decline. I don't consider myself the biggest Pokemon fan in the world, but I've played enough of the games to know, old and new games, by the way, I've played enough of these to know that there has been a sharp decline in quality, care, and love for the franchise by Game Freak and the Pokemon Company and Nintendo. Nintendo is not doing their due diligence by really hammering home the importance of quality in these products. Nintendo is a company that is generally known for the quality and care they put in their titles, the quality put into the experience. That's what they've been known for a very long time. But the problem is these games are getting approved with little to no quality control. There was no reason in the year of our Lord and Savior 2019, Pokemon Sword and Shield should have come out looking the way that it did. 2 years prior, we got a Wii U game, ported to this new console to help the console sell. That Wii U game being The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, looking beautiful on the Nintendo Switch. Granted, the game ran at a slightly unstable frame rate sometimes. The game was a mostly stable experience though, and the game's art direction and art style were gorgeous. The game looked amazing on the console. We got Doom 2016 on the Nintendo Switch. Looks great for the console. Yet the Pokemon Company, with the biggest franchise in the world, the biggest multimedia franchise in the world, bigger than Marvel, DC, bigger than Mickey Mouse, Pokemon, they couldn't spare a little bit of extra time or a little bit of extra money to get a game that does not have N64 trees. I know that's a big meme, but still, that game looked terribly unpolished for a 2019 Nintendo product, regardless of the power of the Nintendo Switch. Terribly unpolished. And we let them get away with that. There was buzz around Pokemon Sword and Shield being lazy, but the game sold well. The game always sells well. And it seems as if actually the worse the games get, the better they sell. It's like a reverse effect, because Scarlet and Violet, let me actually Google these stats. Yeah, okay. Scarlet and Violet, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, the most broken, buggy, unpolished Pokemon games we've ever seen. To be honest, games that should not have been released in that state, games that shouldn't have been approved in the state that they were in, should not have been greenlit. Honestly, it doesn't matter if a game is playable from start to finish. If the experience is horrible for the consumer, the game should not have gone gold. That game, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, is the second best-selling game in the franchise. Do you want to know what the first best-selling game in the franchise is? Pokemon Red and Blue, the first games. And if I'm not mistaken, it's also the fastest selling game in the franchise history. It's like, as consumers, what are we doing? What are we actually doing? And like I said, Nintendo is obviously the main topic of this video, but they're not the only culprits of this issue. This is a systemic issue. It's not just games, but for the sake of this video, for the sake of length, and for the sake of my thought process, I'm going to focus strictly on games. The See You Next Tuesday annual release games are a problem. Genuinely, they're a problem. you could get some good annual release titles, right? I shouldn't have to explain what the problem with the annual releases are. You know, a lot of these game franchises are extremely iterative to the point of being slight changes. You know, a lot of these games are making like money hand over fist. The reason these annual releases succeed and do so well is because the casual consumer does not A, know better, or B, care. And even some hardcore or core gamers are guilty of this. A lot of people just don't care. It's the same for Nintendo fans or whoever else is kind of giving money to these corporations who aren't earning it. The biggest problem is that as consumers, screw consumers, as customers, we have to take into account group economics. We understand sometimes it sucks to miss out on a game or it sucks to miss out on a product, but if it's in pursuit of the products and games getting better over time, we gotta draw a line in the sand somewhere. The thing that bothers me a lot is a lot of gamers seem to be really short-sighted, you know? Like there's not 40 years of a backlog of games to play. That always frustrates me personally, right? You know, this is my little journal, so I'm just kind of speaking on how I feel. But now there were reports not too long ago saying that most gamers nowadays are playing older games, which is, it may just be more of a symbol of the economy than anything, because these gamers are still pre-ordering 2K en masse. 2K26, all 3 versions of it, like versions entering the hundreds of dollars. If I'm not mistaken, the most expensive versions of 2K26 were the most pre-ordered games on the PlayStation Store in the month of August. Higher than original titles, non-annual releases, I'll say. Higher than Battlefield 6, higher than Ghost of Yotei, higher than Borderlands 4. 2K26, the $100 plus edition, was the most pre-ordered game in the store in the month of August. We're lost. I think, you know, this is just my personal opinion on a way this problem could be solved. I think as gamers, man, we just gotta... The backlog of amazing games we've never played is just too large. I think gamers really need to be more open-minded and embrace playing older titles. A lot of people won't play an older title until a remake comes out. And that's just another way that the companies can get money out of you. But hey, remakes aren't all bad. They do bring eyes to the original product in its own way, which is a good thing. But man, there's so many games from so many generations that modern gamers would probably love. But, you know, obviously those games aren't widely syndicated anymore. They don't get a lot of buzz. So it's kind of on the consumer to kind of look into stuff like that. Unfortunately, a lot of people just don't want to. A lot of people want fast access entertainment. Like I said, it's a world where we are actively trained. I think the word I used was groomed. We're actively groomed to not resist the influence of corporation, to actively not resist our brain telling us we don't need that product, you know. And I know I've put a lot of blame on streamers. I can't blame them entirely. You know, they're after their bag or whatever. These corporations are also after their bag. But as consumers, we just gotta be more aware, you know? In terms of this whole Nintendo thing, I genuinely believe Nintendo fans are a lost cause. I think some people are too far gone. You can't really convince them to not buy something that they want to buy. You know, it just is what it is. But in terms of the power of the customer, group economics is a sorely lacking field of financial literacy for a lot of people. A lot of people don't think about how their purchases affect the world as a whole. And because everyone thinks so individualistically when it comes to video games, a lot of people think, yeah, I mean, people are going to boycott this game, but I still want to play it, so I'm going to play it. And if let's say for every 10 people, there are maybe 3 people. Let's do it like this. For every 10 Nintendo fans, there are 3 that abstain from buying the latest Nintendo product. You still have 7 people that are aware of the issue who say they're gonna do their boycott. They're gonna not buy this product, but you know, what does it hurt if I buy the product? 70% of that group is still giving these people their money. The only way active change can be enforced is if the masses enforce it. And that just is what it is, you know? I don't know how much more I have to say about this particular topic, but it's something that's been on my mind a lot for the last few years. The hypocrisy and people begging for change and still subjecting themselves to the same spending habits. Honestly, honestly, I mean, if you want my personal opinion, in terms of Nintendo, unless something extremely anti-consumer happens, or unless the value of this console isn't made apparent within the next year, I don't think anything's gonna happen. Just because people as a whole nowadays, more than ever, and this is what I meant by this is a symptom of something larger. Now more than ever, people are more fractured. People are more divided over everything now more than ever. And so even when it comes to a topic like video games, people feel more attacked when someone challenges their belief. People feel targeted when someone advocates for not spending money on a product that they want. It feels like they as a person are being attacked because people now place their identity a lot more in their personal beliefs. And so it creates a lot of tension with consumers, and a lot of people will buy the product in spite, like you saw a lot of people kind of rubbing it in people's faces that they were buying the Switch 2. Like, people were bragging about their pre-orders or whatever. It's a problem that without unification on any front, it'll never get solved. But I do strongly believe that it's a problem that absolutely can be solved. We just have to get our stuff together. This is a topic I felt strongly about for a long time, and I didn't really have a place that I could get all my feelings about it out. I didn't really have a place where I could just kind of rant about this thing. So I'm doing it on the internet. If anybody out there is listening, I appreciate you. My thoughts and opinions may be controversial to some. I don't really know. Again, this is just my little journal place where I can kind of get some of my thoughts off, anonymously or whatever. So if you have your own thoughts and opinions, I'd love to hear them in the comments.